It was a quiet night in the small town of Dustwood, where silence stretched across the land like an invisible blanket. The moon hung low, casting its pale glow over the wooden buildings and dirt roads that made up this forgotten corner of the Wild West. But on this particular night, something unusual happened. A sound broke through the stillness, faint yet piercing enough to stir even the most hardened hearts. A baby cried. The wails echoed softly from the church door, nestled at the edge of town near the old oak tree that had stood there longer than anyone could remember. Reverend Samuel, who lived alone in a modest house behind the church, woke with a start. His heart pounded as he pulled on his boots and grabbed the lantern hanging by his bed. The cries grew louder as he approached the front steps of the church, each step heavy with anticipation and dread. There, wrapped in a tattered blanket, lay a newborn infant no older than a few days. The baby's face was flushed red from crying, but it seemed otherwise unharmed. Reverend Samuel knelt down, his hands trembling as he picked up the child. "Who would leave you here?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a story far more extraordinary than any sermon he had ever delivered. But then, as if the scene wasn't strange enough already, there came another presence, an enormous black cow standing guard beside the church steps. Its eyes gleamed under the moonlight, watching intently as Reverend Samuel held the baby close. The Reverend froze, unsure whether to be alarmed or intrigued. He reached out cautiously, patting the cow's flank. "You too, huh? What are you doing here?" The cow didn't budge. It stayed rooted at the spot, refusing to leave the baby's side. And so began the peculiar bond between the abandoned child, the mysterious cow, and the good Reverend of Dustwood. Days turned into weeks, and soon the entire town learned of the strange occurrence. Word spread quickly among the dusty streets and saloons, drawing curious stares whenever Reverend Samuel passed by with the baby cradled in his arms. People whispered about the cow, which now resided in the churchyard, grazing lazily during the day and sleeping soundly near the church doors at night. "Reckon it's some kind of miracle," said Mrs. Hargrove, the baker's wife, as she handed Reverend Samuel a loaf of fresh bread one morning. Her gaze lingered on the cow, which was munching peacefully on patches of grass nearby. Never seen anything like it. Others weren't so convinced. Some thought it was a trick, while others believed the cow belonged to someone who'd simply wandered off without claiming it. But no matter how many theories were spun, none could explain why the animal refused to leave the church grounds, or why it seemed so protective of the baby. Reverend Samuel named the baby Hope, for reasons obvious to everyone who heard her laugh or saw her smile. As for the cow, it became known simply as Blackie, though nobody truly knew where it had come from or what drove it to stay. Together, they formed an unlikely trio that drew both admiration and skepticism from the townsfolk. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Reverend Samuel sat on the porch of his home, rocking little Hope in his arms. Blackie grazed nearby, its movements slow and deliberate. The air carried the scent of pine trees and distant campfires, mingling with the sounds of coyotes calling in the hills. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful, until the storm hit. It started with a rumble in the distance, low and menacing, shaking the ground beneath their feet. By the time Reverend Samuel realized what was happening, the sky had darkened and rain poured down in torrents. Lightning split the heavens, illuminating the chaos unfolding around them. A flash flood swept through the valley, carrying debris and mud with terrifying force. Reverend Samuel clutched Hope tightly, shielding her from the elements as water rushed past the churchyard. Blackie brayed loudly, stampeding toward higher ground despite the danger. Without hesitation, the Reverend followed, climbing onto the cow's back with Hope still secure in his arms. Together, they battled against the rising waters, seeking refuge wherever they could find it. When dawn finally broke, the devastation was clear. Homes had been destroyed, crops buried under layers of silt, and lives forever changed. Yet somehow, through it all, Reverend Samuel, Hope, and Blackie had survived. Their resilience became a symbol of hope for the battered town, inspiring others to rebuild and persevere. But the mystery deepened when, amid the wreckage, Reverend Samuel discovered a hidden compartment beneath the church floorboards. Inside was a bundle of letters tied together with a fraying ribbon. Each letter bore the same handwriting, elegant and precise, detailing a tale of love, loss, and redemption. Little did the Reverend know, these letters held the key to unlocking the truth, not just about Hope's origins, but also about Blackie's unwavering loyalty. As he read through the words, tears streamed down his face, mixing with the lingering dampness of the storm. The final twist came months later, when a stranger arrived in town. Dressed in a long coat and carrying a suitcase, the man walked straight to the church, asking for Reverend Samuel. His eyes were sharp, filled with purpose, and his voice carried authority. "I've been looking for you," the man said, addressing not just the Reverend, but also Blackie, who stood nearby, and her. He gestured toward Hope, who giggled innocently in her makeshift playpen. Reverend Samuel hesitated, unsure of what to say. But then the man revealed the truth. Hope was the daughter of a wealthy rancher whose family had fallen victim to betrayal and greed. Blackie, once part of the ranch's herd, had escaped during the attack, carrying a secret message that ultimately led to the child's rescue. The revelation left the Reverend speechless. He had thought himself merely a caretaker, a guardian of sorts, when in reality, he had played a pivotal role in restoring justice to a fractured world. As the stranger prepared to take Hope away, promising her a life of comfort and security, Blackie let out a mournful cry. For the first time since arriving in Dustwood, the cow showed signs of distress, pacing back and forth as if unwilling to let go. Reverend Samuel placed a hand on Blackie's head, feeling the warmth radiating from its fur. "Stay with her," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the wind. "Protect her always." And so, against all odds, the unlikely companions parted ways. Not as strangers, but as pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. The baby left at the church door, the cow that refused to leave its side, and the Reverend who dared to believe in miracles, all bound together by threads unseen yet undeniable. In the end, the tale of Dustwood served as a reminder that sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones closest to the truth. The stranger, a man by the name of Elias Thorne, introduced himself as a distant relative and confidant of Hope's late father. He explained that he had been entrusted with finding the child and ensuring her safety after the tragic events that befell the family ranch. His presence in Dustwood was no coincidence. It was destiny, he claimed, though his words carried an air of finality that left Reverend Samuel uneasy. Elias stood tall, his boots creaking against the wooden floor of the church as he spoke. "This town has done well by her," he admitted, glancing at Hope, who played innocently with a wooden rattle Reverend Samuel had carved for her. "But she deserves more, a life befitting her heritage." His tone softened slightly, but there was steel beneath it, unyielding and firm. Reverend Samuel nodded slowly, understanding the weight of Elias' words. Yet, as he watched Blackie circle the churchyard restlessly, his heart ached. The cow had become more than just a guardian. It was a symbol of resilience, loyalty, and love in its purest form. How could they part ways now? Days passed, and preparations were made for Hope's departure. The townsfolk gathered outside the church, their faces a mix of sadness and curiosity. They admired Hope, marveling at how far she'd come since being found abandoned on that fateful night. But their eyes lingered longest on Blackie, whose presence seemed to grow larger with every passing moment. On the morning of their leave, the sky was overcast, heavy clouds threatening rain. Reverend Samuel held Hope one last time, cradling her close as if trying to memorize every detail of her tiny face. "Remember me sometimes," he whispered, his voice breaking ever so slightly. He handed her gently to Elias, who nodded gravely before turning toward the carriage waiting beyond the churchyard. Blackie let out a low bellow, stepping forward as if protesting the separation. Its massive frame blocked the path, refusing to allow Elias or the carriage driver proceed. For several tense moments, the standoff continued, man versus beast, neither willing to back down. "Move aside, animal," the carriage driver shouted, raising his whip. But Elias raised a hand, halting him. "No," he said firmly. "There's something here we don't fully understand." Reverend Samuel stepped between them, placing a calming hand on Blackie's shoulder. "It's all right," he murmured softly. "She'll be safe now." To his surprise, Blackie lowered its head, submitting reluctantly to the inevitable. It stepped aside, allowing the carriage to move forward, but not without casting a longing glance back at Hope as she disappeared inside. As the carriage rolled away, dust rising in its wake, Blackie remained rooted to the spot, watching until it vanished from sight. The townsfolk exchanged glances, some wiping away tears, others simply shaking their heads in disbelief. Never had they seen such devotion, not even among humans. Life in Dustwood resumed its quiet rhythm, though the absence of Hope and Blackie left a void that lingered like an unanswered question. Reverend Samuel found solace in tending to the church and ministering to the townsfolk, but his thoughts often drifted to the little girl and the cow that had changed everything. Months later, a letter arrived, delivered by a rider who dismounted briefly before continuing on his journey. The envelope bore no return address, only the name Reverend Samuel scrawled neatly across the front. Inside, the message was brief but heartfelt. Dear Reverend, Astra's Hope is thriving under my care, growing stronger each day. She talks about you often, asking when she'll see you again. As for Blackie, I couldn't bear to separate her from him entirely, so I brought him along. He watches over her still, as steadfast as ever. Thank you for everything, for giving her a chance when none existed. Asterisk with gratitude. Elias Thorne, asterisk. Reverend Samuel read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. A smile tugged at the corners of his lips despite the bittersweet ache in his chest. Somewhere out there, in a world bigger than Dustwood, Hope and Blackie were forging new memories together, and perhaps someday they would return. Until then, the Reverend would keep the faith, lighting candles in the church and praying for their continued happiness. After all, miracles weren't always permanent. They were fleeting glimpses of grace, meant to remind us of what truly mattered. And so, the story of the baby left at the church door and the cow that refused to leave its side lived on, whispered through generations in the winds of the Wild West. The days stretched into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. Reverend Samuel found himself often gazing toward the horizon during sunsets, his mind wandering to thoughts of Hope and Blackie. The letter from Elias Thorne had brought both comfort and longing, a reminder that miracles sometimes came with strings attached. Strings woven from duty, responsibility, and love. Life in Dustwood carried on much as it always had, though the town seemed quieter now without the laughter of a baby echoing through its streets or the presence of an enormous black cow grazing near the churchyard. Yet, even amidst this newfound stillness, there were whispers, a quiet buzz among the townsfolk about strange occurrences happening beyond the boundaries of their small community. Ranchers returning from distant lands spoke of sightings, a massive black cow standing vigil over travelers lost in the desert, guiding them to water when all hope seemed lost. Miners told tales of hearing a baby's laugh deep within abandoned mine shafts, a sound so pure it gave them courage to dig deeper for gold, or salvation. These stories, fantastical as they were, began to take root in the collective imagination of Dustwood, blending reality with myth. One evening, as Reverend Samuel prepared for another sermon, he noticed something unusual etched into the wooden pew at the back of the church. It was a symbol, a circle with 3 intersecting lines forming a star-like pattern. He hadn't seen it before, nor could he recall anyone carving it recently. Intrigued, he traced a mark with his finger, wondering if it held any significance. That night, under the cover of darkness, Reverend Samuel decided to investigate further. Guided by intuition rather than logic, he followed the trail of similar symbols carved subtly into trees along the outskirts of town. Each marking pointed him farther away from Dustwood, deeper into the wilderness where the land grew wilder and less forgiving. The journey took longer than expected, testing his endurance and resolve. By the 3rd day, Reverend Samuel found himself standing at the edge of a vast canyon, its walls painted in hues of red and gold by the setting sun. Below, nestled in a hidden valley untouched by time, lay a sight that defied belief, a sprawling ranch unlike anything he'd ever seen. The buildings were grand, constructed with materials far superior to those used in Dustwood. Horses grazed peacefully in lush pastures, their coats gleaming in the fading light. But what caught Reverend Samuel's breath was the unmistakable figure of Blackie, standing proudly beside a young girl who looked remarkably like Hope. At first, Reverend Samuel thought he might be dreaming, but as he descended cautiously into the valley, calling out softly so as not to startle anyone, he realized this was no illusion. The girl turned toward him, her eyes wide with recognition. "Reverend!" she cried, running to embrace him. It was indeed Hope, older now, her voice filled with excitement and warmth. She clung to him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I missed you," she said simply, her words carrying the weight of years unspoken. Behind her, Elias Thorne emerged, his expression calm yet wary. "You've come a long way," he remarked, nodding toward the canyon rim. "But I suppose some ties run deeper than others." Reverend Samuel struggled to find words, overwhelmed by the reunion. "How did you? Why is this place hidden?" Elias gestured for them to sit beneath the shade of a nearby tree. As they settled in, he began to reveal the truth, a truth so unbelievable it bordered on legend. Hope's father, it turned out, had been more than just a wealthy rancher. He was part of a secret society dedicated to preserving ancient knowledge and protecting those who possessed extraordinary gifts. Blackie wasn't merely an ordinary cow. It was imbued with powers passed down through generations, tasked with safeguarding individuals destined for greatness. When Hope was born, Elias explained, her connection to Blackie became evident almost immediately. They shared a bond unlike anything we'd ever seen. But danger followed closely behind. Those who sought to exploit their abilities forced us into hiding. That's why we left Dustwood, to ensure her safety. Hope listened intently, her hand resting gently on Blackie's flank. "Does that mean I have special powers too?" she asked, her voice tinged with wonder. Elias smiled faintly. "Perhaps. Time will tell. For now, your role is to learn, grow, and trust in those around you." Reverend Samuel sat quietly, digesting everything he'd learned. Though surprised, he couldn't deny the sense of peace washing over him. The mystery surrounding Hope and Blackie finally made sense, not as random acts of fate, but as pieces of a larger puzzle waiting to be solved. As the stars emerged overhead, casting a silver glow across the valley, Reverend Samuel knew his place was here, at least for a while longer. He would stay, helping Hope navigate the challenges ahead, while learning more about the secrets buried within this hidden world. And so, the story continued, not as an ending, but as a new beginning. In the heart of the Wild West, where legends lived and dreams took flight, the bond between a child, a cow, and a reverend remained unbroken, a testament to the power of faith, family, and the unseen forces that shape our lives. The days that followed were filled with wonder and discovery. Reverend Samuel immersed himself in the hidden world of the valley, learning more about the society Elias had mentioned, a group known only as the Guardians. They were protectors of ancient knowledge, tasked with safeguarding not just individuals like Hope, but also places of great power scattered across the land. The ranch was no ordinary refuge. It was a sanctuary, a place where time seemed to stand still and secrets lingered in every shadow. Hope, now aware of her unique heritage, embraced her new life with boundless curiosity. She spent hours exploring the vast grounds of the ranch, accompanied always by Blackie, whose presence offered both comfort and protection. Together, they ventured into dense forests, crossed babbling brooks, and climbed rocky outcrops, each adventure revealing something new about the world around them. And within them, Reverend Samuel noticed changes in Hope almost immediately. Her laughter carried a deeper resonance, as though it echoed through unseen realms. Her eyes sparkled with an intelligence far beyond her years, and she often paused mid-conversation, listening intently to something none of the others could hear. It became clear that her connection to Blackie was growing stronger, their bond evolving into something neither fully understood nor easily explained. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in fiery hues of orange and pink, Elias gathered everyone in the main hall of the ranch. The room was adorned with artifacts from civilizations long forgotten. Scrolls written in languages no one could decipher, maps charting lands unknown to modern man, and relics whose purpose remained shrouded in mystery. "Hope," Elias began, his voice steady yet carrying an undercurrent of emotion, "it's time you learn more about your true nature. Your father believed deeply in the potential you carry within you. He entrusted me with the task of guiding you, ensuring you understand the responsibilities that come with such gifts. Hope sat upright, her gaze fixed on Elias with unwavering attention. Beside her, Blackie stood alert, its massive frame a silent testament to its role as protector. Reverend Samuel watched from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride and concern. Elias produced a small, intricately carved box from beneath the table. Inside lay a medallion, its surface etched with the same symbol Reverend Samuel had discovered back in Dustwood, the circle with 3 intersecting lines forming a star-like pattern. This medallion has been passed down through generations of your family, Elias explained. It is more than just jewelry. It is a key, a gateway to unlocking the full extent of your abilities. Hope reached out hesitantly, her fingers brushing against the cool metal. As soon as she touched it, a soft glow emanated from the medallion, bathing the room in a warm, golden light. Everyone fell silent, awestruck by the display. Even Blackie let out a low, contented bellow, as if acknowledging the momentous occasion. "What does this mean?" Hope asked, her voice trembling with excitement and apprehension. "It means," Elias replied, "that you are ready to embrace who you truly are and the destiny that awaits you." Over the next few weeks, Hope's training began in earnest. Under Elias' guidance, she delved into studies that ranged from ancient texts to practical exercises designed to hone her burgeoning talents. She discovered she could communicate telepathically with Blackie, sharing thoughts and emotions without uttering a single word. She learned to manipulate energy, creating shields of light that protected her and those around her. And most astonishingly, she found she possessed an innate ability to heal, not just physical wounds, but also emotional scars, offering solace to anyone fortunate enough to cross her path. Reverend Samuel marveled at her progress, watching as she transformed before his eyes. Yet, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness knowing that this remarkable journey would eventually lead her away from him once more. For despite the joy of their reunion, he understood that Hope's path was destined to take her far beyond the confines of the valley. One night, as they sat together beneath a canopy of stars, Reverend Samuel voiced his concerns. "Hope," he said gently, "do you ever wonder what lies ahead for you? This place is wonderful, yes, but I sense there's much more waiting for you beyond these walls." Hope considered his words carefully, her young face reflecting a wisdom far older than her years. "I do wonder sometimes," she admitted. "But I also know that whatever happens, wherever I go, I'll never forget where I came from or the people who helped me become who I am." She reached out and squeezed his hand, her touch reassuring. "Even if we're apart, Reverend, you'll always be with me, just like Blackie." Reverend Samuel smiled, feeling a lump rise in his throat. "And you with me," he whispered. Time moved swiftly in the valley, marked not by clocks or calendars, but by the changing seasons and the rhythm of life itself. Spring gave way to summer, which faded into autumn, and finally winter arrived, blanketing the land in a pristine layer of snow. Through it all, Hope continued to grow, her powers expanding alongside her understanding of the world around her. But as the months passed, whispers of unrest began to reach the ears of the Guardians. Somewhere out there, forces opposed to their mission stirred, seeking to exploit the very gifts Hope embodied. Danger loomed on the horizon, a threat that could endanger not just her, but everyone she cared about. Elias called another meeting, this time joined by several other members of the Guardians. Their faces bore expressions of grim determination, their voices hushed yet urgent. "We've received reports of increased activity among our adversaries," Elias announced. "They know about Hope. They're coming for her." Hope felt a chill run down her spine, but she squared her shoulders, refusing to show fear. "Then let them come," she declared, her voice steady. "I won't hide anymore. If they want me, they'll have to face Blackie and me." Reverend Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. "Whatever happens," he said firmly, "we'll face it together." As preparations commenced, the atmosphere in the valley shifted, charged with tension and anticipation. Traps were set, defenses reinforced, and strategies devised. But deep down, everyone knew this confrontation wouldn't be easy. It would test not just their strength, but also their resolve and their faith in one another. When the day finally came, the skies darkened unnaturally, clouds swirling overhead as if summoned by some malevolent force. A horde of shadowy figures emerged from the forest, their numbers overwhelming, their intentions clear. Battle cries echoed through the valley, punctuated by the thunderous roar of Blackie, standing defiantly at the forefront of the defense. Hope took her position beside Blackie, the medallion glowing brightly around her neck. Energy coursed through her veins, fueling her determination. Reverend Samuel and Elias flanked her, weapons drawn, ready to fight alongside her. The Guardians formed a protective circle around them, their combined efforts creating a barrier of light that repelled the advancing attackers. For hours, the battle raged, each side pushing the other to its limits. Hope unleashed waves of energy, striking down foes with precision and grace. Blackie charged fearlessly, its hooves crushing enemies beneath its weight. And Reverend Samuel, wielding nothing more than courage and conviction, stood steadfast, inspiring those around him with his unyielding spirit. Just when victory seemed within reach, a chilling voice cut through the chaos. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in darkness, radiating an aura of evil. This was their leader, the one who sought to claim Hope's powers for himself. His presence sent tremors through the ground, shaking even the strongest defenders. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You're nothing but puppets dancing on strings. Hand over child, and I might spare your lives." Hope stepped forward, her voice ringing clear despite the storm raging around her. "Never," she spat, her medallion flaring brighter than ever. "My powers aren't yours to take. They belong to me, and to those I choose to protect." With a cry of defiance, she channeled every ounce of energy she possessed, unleashing a blinding burst of light that engulfed the battlefield. The shadows recoiled, screaming in agony as the purity of her power burned away their corruption. One by one, the attackers fell, vanquished by her unwavering will. When the dust settled, the valley stood quiet once more, bathed in the soft glow of dawn breaking over the horizon. The threat had been neutralized for now, but Hope knew this wasn't the end. There would always be challenges ahead, tests of her strength and character. Yet, surrounded by those who loved and believed in her, she faced the future with hope in her heart and fire in her soul. Together, they would continue to guard the secrets of the past, while forging a path toward a brighter tomorrow. And so, the story of the baby left at the church door, and the cow that refused to leave its side, lived on, written not just in ink, but in the hearts of all who heard it. For in the Wild West, where legends walked and dreams took flight, miracles weren't just possible, they were inevitable.